Welcome to New Rechts, or for English listeners, New Right. My name is Daniel de Liever, and today I'm really happy to talk about a topic that sadly we don't hear a lot about in Western media, and that is the relationship or the tension between India and Pakistan. So I'm very happy today to talk with Mr. Karti Chidambaram. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
That's fine.
About the situation. But thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
And for those that don't know you, you're an Indian politician, but also a businessman and a lawyer. And you serve since 2019 in the Indian National Congress. So I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective on what's going on. But before we go into the actual relationship, I also want to give our viewers a little bit of a more personal overview first. So maybe you could start with telling us why you actually got into politics to begin with.
See, I've been interested in politics since I was very young. My father is still in politics, and he's quite a senior politician in India. And I grew up in a household where politics was the centrality of activity. So perhaps that is one of the biggest reasons why I was initiated in and interested in it. But nobody pushed me to join politics. I've always wanted to be in politics since I was in school. So it was only a natural progression of my inclination to join politics. And I joined politics actively since 1996. So I've worked in elections for other candidates. I've worked for the party. I've campaigned. I've done all kinds of activities for the party. I only contested my first election in 2014. So, but I've been in politics. It's going to be 30 years once the new year comes now. So.
And is it different than you expected to be in politics over the years, or is it still like you had these inclinations when you were younger?
I am very frustrated now, and there is a lot of disappointments because the pace of change or the effectiveness of our role is not as much as I want it to be. We don't get things done. It's not just a reflection of my own inability. I think it's a reflection of the Indian system. India is a very bureaucratic country. It's also a country which is tremendously unfair and very unequal. Some people have all the privileges, but a lot of people do not even have the basics. I fortunately come from the section which is well provided for, but India is a very unfair country, and I wish we worked more efficiently and at a much more, our system worked in a much faster pace to bring about change. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening, and that disappoints me. And a lot of time in Indian politics is also wasted on unnecessary issues and on rhetorical issues or on emotive issues without really focusing on the substantive issues which matter to the people.
I'm sorry to hear that. I do think it sounds familiar to many people also in the West, where even though I can imagine that the differences are smaller. So as someone who has then been in a while in politics, has it been like you expected that it would be?
No, to be honest, I am quite disappointed and frustrated at the effectiveness and the pace in which we work. Because India is a very unequal country. Many people don't even have the basics, and our system is so bureaucratic and lethargic that we don't deliver to the most needy in time. And while some of us are very fortunate to be provided with all the resources, but a vast majority struggle for daily things in life. And I find our political system and our administrative system not adept enough to service the people effectively and in time. And that frustrates me a great deal.
I can imagine that. I think the differences are, from my understanding, bigger in India than they are in Western European countries, where even here we have people that are unfortunate. So I can imagine that. And as we're talking about India in general, I think India is very misunderstood in the West. There's not a lot of knowledge or talks about India. So I'm curious what, from your experience, has been like the biggest misunderstanding that people in Western countries have about India.
See, I don't blame the West for not understanding India very well, because you only understand a people and a country if you interact with them and you have a close culture and commercial ties. But we don't have that kind of a people-to-people contact in close proximity often. So I really don't blame the West for not understanding or getting India right. India is a complicated country. It has had a long history, I mean, a long history even prior to the colonial days, and then also a complicated existence, because we are not. It's not just you can't put India in a little box and understand it. There are many people, there are many cultures, there are many languages in India, and everything is not. And you can't just have one definition of India. So India varies from region to region, people to people. So it's not. I would say it's actually difficult even for me living in India to understand India fully and to understand all the people of India fully. So I really don't blame the West for not understanding India. India is complicated. India is not the same. I mean, we're not in terms of our the people will find culturally India to be very different, and the best way to approach India is with an open mind. And but India will also be shocking, because I have been to the West and I've studied in the West. In fact, I stayed for a whole summer in the Netherlands playing tennis in 1989. In fact,
Oh, really?
I played tennis for a club in Ede Wageningen, so life can be very different from idyllic Holland to chaotic India. So, so you just have to approach India with an open mind, and you have to also understand that India is not an egalitarian society. I mean, to a great extent, most of Europe is quite egalitarian. I'm not saying all of Europe is egalitarian, but to a
Hmm.
large extent, society is quite egalitarian, particularly in a country like Holland. It's quite egalitarian and quite open. Whereas India would be very different, and you need to just approach it with an open mind and not and there will be surprises, there will be shocks, but you need to understand that there are the what shocks you is not necessarily universal in India. It's at a point, at a place, and another place and another point will be different from what you felt. So I think an open attitude is what the West needs to understand India. And I don't think that India can be understood in one book or in by watching one program. Can only be understood if you experience it over a period of time and engage with it over a period of time.
I think that's a good point. It's also a tremendously big country, many
Yes, it
people,
is.
different cultures. So, of course, that's different when the Netherlands is 18 million people in the whole country. So, I get your point. But I would ask then a second question, which would be, if we are quite different, why should people in the West maybe care more to try and understand India?
I mean, we are the largest population in the world. So which means we are the largest market in the world. And you have to understand your largest market in the world. I don't think there can be any company in the world which can aspire to be a global company without engaging or with dealing with India or with Indian customers at some level or the other. And India is not just only a customer, but India is also a supplier of goods and services. So, it's impossible to ignore India and to operate in the modern world in terms of business, commerce, or technology.
Yes, and I do think that we are starting to see more of a focus on India. And I think therefore, that's also why I wanted to talk to you today. It's hard for people to grasp also the more geopolitical side of India, with such a tremendous amount of people, and I guess economy that's starting to grow and grow. Of course, there's this tension for a long period of time already with Pakistan, and you hear in the news people being worried about it without actually grasping it. So if you want to understand it, if you go a little bit back into the future, what would you say about before the pre-British era of this region? How should this be understood for people from Western countries?
You see, India was never a unified country. There was not one kingdom. It was a large land connected culturally, perhaps, and at times connected through kingdoms. But it's really the British which amalgamated this vast area of land into one administrative block. Until then, there were many kingdoms, and there were kingdoms which were large, which had a sway over a large part of the Indian subcontinent. And then there were many smaller kingdoms which had only their writ in smaller areas. But when the British came, and for the 200 years, they sort of amalgamated the entire, uh, greater India, as you would call it, which includes present-day Pakistan and Bangladesh, and into one administrative unit. And so it was really the modern state of India is a British creation. And and when the British left, the colonization itself was a very painful period in our people's history. Why I think we were greatly exploited. A lot of our wealth was depleted. People were subjugated, and while we might have gained a little bit in terms of administrative structure, but the pain inflicted on the people was also tremendous. And when the British left, and they left in a hurry, especially after World War II, because they really wanted to wind down their colonies, as they would call it, and their empire, the partition was a very hurried exercise where the majority Muslim parts of India, at least two, on the western front and on the eastern front, were carved out into a separate country. Bangladesh and Pakistan were one country, and the rest of India was another country. And that was a very painful separation. Politically, it was perhaps necessary to do. Some argue that it could have been avoided, but now a lot of water has flown in the Ganges since then, and so it's really quite pointless to talk about it. But it was a painful separation. They had mass exchange of peoples, and people gave up life as they knew it for hundreds of years or centuries. They lived in one place, and they had to give it up and leave and go and live to another place because of their religion. And it was and the separation was based on religion, and the same people who culturally were the same but who belonged to two different religions separated and left. But India itself retains a very large Muslim population. In fact, there are more Muslims in India than in Pakistan. India today is the second largest Islamic country in the world after Indonesia. And India chose to be a secular country as opposed to Pakistan, which became a theocratic country. Then in 1971, the eastern part of Pakistan, which was Bangladesh, which is where a Bengali-speaking part of Pakistan, separated from Pakistan with active Indian military intervention under the leadership of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So then they became two separate countries. So all these separations were very painful. But the fulcrum of the Indian society or the Indian constitution was to be a secular state, whereas the centrality of the idea of Pakistan was based on a theocratic religious identity. So that makes it very different. But of course, India now is also moving towards a kind of an Hindu religious identity politics, but not in a constitutional manner, but in a political manner. It has been moving in that direction since 2014.
Yes, and I think it's a good dynamic that you're describing here. Also, indeed, within India and also with its neighbors, between, you could say, these different religions, of course, that people try to bring the conflict down, I think, to make it also a little bit easier. But what do you think in general has been the relationship in India between Hinduism, the largest religion by far, and Islam?
It's complicated. On a people-to-people basis, by and large, it has been friendly. But from a mass identity point of view, it's always been complicated, because India, I mean, and the way people view the relationship also varies from region to region. And in the north, it's far more complicated than in the south. In the north, they carry the wounds of partition, so that colors their view about how the religions view each other. And then also the period in which, where vast tracts of North India, the vast majority of the area, North India, was under the rule of the Mughals. Even though the Mughals came in from Uzbekistan and from the Mongol origin people through Uzbekistan. They Indianized and they ruled India for more than 4 centuries. But of course, that's a Muslim monarchy over an Hindu population for 4 centuries was also complicated. That complicated history in the north of India. So whereas the south did not have this kind of a history, so their view and their relationship with Islam is slightly more cordial than what it is in the north. But today in India, the relationships are quite frayed. That's also because of the politics, because of the Hindu identity politics which has come up, and also because of and I would also say that the secular leadership among the Islamists has ceded back. So it's really there are no secular voices prominent voices in Islam. There are again fundamental voices raising up there, which is again countered by the fundamentalist rise of Hindu identity politics. So this is at a conflict today. So I would not say that the relationship is very comfortable in India. It's quite frayed in the edges, as I would say. But by and large, people to people is fine. But we always read about troubling incidents which happen every day. And I don't think the relationship between the majority and the minority in India today is completely harmonious as it should be. And also the fact that then in Pakistan sponsored terrorist acts and the fractured history of Kashmir and events in Kashmir, and then the fallout of that also has a bearing on how this relationship is going forward. But the Hindu identity politics, which has now taken firm root in the north of India, is also contributing to this kind of tense coexistence.
I think a lot of people have an idea of more of the Muslim fundamentalism, because also something we can struggle with in Europe. But I think the Hindu identity politics for people, maybe it's a little bit harder to understand. So maybe you can also then surely say why this actually started to come up and how you see in India how this affects things.
See, I think the problem you see from Muslim extremism in the West, that is far more pronounced and much more it has led to more brutal instances. I don't think Hindu fundamentalism has crossed the border in any way. The Hindu fundamentalism is by and large aimed at the Muslim population within India. It is not something which is exhibited outside the borders of India. It is something which is exhibited within the borders of India, whereas Islamic fundamentalism is not confined within territorial borders. It transcends territorial borders. But fundamentalism is fundamentalism. Anybody who believes that their religion is superior to another, and anybody who believes that the practice of another faith is inferior to them, it will lead to this. And in India, I think because there was this feeling that the Hindu identity was not getting its fair due, and the current ruling party, the BJP, was able to tap into that sentiment, which stems from the painful partition, and also from the history of Muslim monarchy ruling over an Hindu population for many centuries. I think they tapped into that angst and built a political narrative which is giving them very good political dividends in the north of India. So, but fundamentalism is fundamentalism. I am a secularist. I don't believe that. I believe religion is a private affair, and it really shouldn't be mixed up with the affairs of the state. But increasingly, my view is not something which is gaining much purchase in India. I mean, at least in the north of India. I come from the south. In my part of the world, yes, what I say seems to be more of the norm than what's happening in the north.
It's good to make that distinction. And when we go back to, let's say, the relationship with Pakistan, then you already mentioned the 1947 petition of course the British Empire. How has, after this, you could say, painful transfer of people, migration of people, how is this relation formed from then into the modern era?
Yeah, I think that the exchange of people was a very painful exercise, and many people in the north of India carry those scars. Many people in the north of India came in as refugees with nothing, and I'm sure many went to Pakistan with nothing as well. So they really had to rebuild lives from 1947 onwards, and that scars have not healed. And the idea of Pakistan being a theocratic state and who's always constantly interfering into India with their state and non-state actors in acts of terror only makes things worse. And I think our relationship are at an all-time low today, and I don't see them becoming normal in the near future.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I think also to understand this, maybe we need to also talk a little bit about Kashmir. You already shortly mentioned it, but a lot of the incidents and attention is around Kashmir. So maybe you can explain why this is such a contagious place for both India and Pakistan at this point.
See, Kashmir was at the time of independence there was a Hindu ruler over Kashmir who chose to accede to India, even though he had a significant Islamic population. But now, as far as we are concerned, Kashmir is an integral part of India. That is absolutely non-negotiable. But it is a state which has at least the Kashmir part of the Kashmir has two parts, Jammu and Kashmir. Kashmir has as a Muslim majority or a complete Muslim population, because the Hindu population there has sort of been expelled from it in the 80s itself. From the 80s onwards, there'll be no Hindu population in the Kashmir part of the Jammu Kashmir. But we consider Kashmir to be an integral part of India that is non-negotiable. But Pakistan still claims to that Kashmir should become part of them. There is a thought process among some people in Kashmir who say they need to be independent and neutral. But I think we have crossed all that now, and I think the Kashmir has to reconcile itself, or the people of Kashmir, I think vast majority have, but whoever hasn't has to reconcile themselves to being part of the Indian Union. There's no question of that. There is a small part of Kashmir which is still occupied by Pakistan. We call it the POK, which we don't recognize as part of them, but in reality they have administrative and military control over. But Kashmir is practically non-negotiable. And because India being a secular state, I don't think there is a strong case for anybody to say they need to secede from India because they don't belong to the religion of the majority of the people. I think Indian constitution is secular. It gives rights. It's a different thing that the politics of today might flare incidents up. But as far as Kashmir is concerned, it's a settled issue. It is a part of India. India will never cede Kashmir, and Kashmir is ours. And it's better that people reconcile with it and learn to live with it and not keep fighting against that claim which India has. But Pakistan doesn't seem to relent, and this what happened in last month with this terrorist strike on tourists is one more attempt by Pakistan to constantly destabilize the peace in Kashmir. But of course, Kashmir had a special status by law, which has been abrogated by this government. I don't agree with the method in which they abrogated it, but that has been done. And their status as an independent state has been reduced to a union territory. So the powers of the elected government there are diminished, and a lot of power is exercised by the federal government. So those things can be corrected. Those are all Indian administrative corrections. But as far as the territory itself is concerned, there is no question that it is part and parcel of India.
All right. Let me then, to play devil's advocate, to really understand it. If you say this is a majority Muslim or predominantly only Muslim region, and part of it is even militarily controlled by Pakistan, why for the Indian people is Kashmir also so important that you say it is non-negotiable, it's an integral part of India, when you in the beginning said that this was, I guess, during this previous time, the decision was made that this should be part of India, but it could also have, I guess, potentially become a part of Pakistan, if I understand correctly.
See, there are other parts of India too, in which either regions, sub-regions, regions, or cities which are also Muslim majority. So, no, every Muslim majority area within a city or a province does not automatically go to Pakistan. There were areas which were designated for Pakistan, including Bangladesh, and that was it. So, to keep on adding territory wherever you think there were significant number of Muslims to Pakistan was not acceptable. And there was a Hindu population in Kashmir as well. And that Kashmir, they were known as the Pandits, and they have been sort of exiled from their own homeland from the 80s. So it's not as if that there's no principle saying that then you can go by city and say this block has got Muslims, so this block will belong to Pakistan, and the other block will have Hindus, and you belong to India. That is not how this partition was agreed to. The partition was agreed to because it was agreed, in my opinion, in a very short span of time, because the British wanted to get out in a hurry, and some areas were designated and some areas weren't. But you can't go and take a scissors and cut every area into sub areas and designate this as one country or another. And Kashmir, at that time, the sovereign ruler there had the right to declare his allegiance to any nation, and he declared his allegiance to India, and that settled the matter.
Fair point. I just wanted to clarify it. I think it's good to get it as sharp as possible. And you already mentioned the tragic terror attack where 26 people were shot dead. Well, this was, I guess, the most recent tragedy that happened over there. Well, what has been the impact that you have felt among Indians in India once this happened?
I think this is not just another terrorist attack. This is the first time a terrorist attack has happened where the terrorists separated the people according to religion and killed only the Hindu people. The before terror acts of terror would be random violence in an area where there is a population, and it would be indiscriminate bombing, shooting, whatever, and would kill people of all faiths. This is the only incident where the terrorists actively and proactively separated the people on the basis of religion and targeted and killed only the Hindu males. So this has left a very deep scar on the Indian psyche, and that is why there is such unanimity in India for the military strikes which India undertook on the terrorist camps in Pakistan. So this has only made the will of India much stronger. It has united India to fight this kind of state, non-state actors, which Pakistan seems to always sponsor. Because in a conventional war, Pakistan will be no match to India. So Pakistan has been resorting to these kind of, as they say, 1,000 little cuts on India ever so often. And I think now the patience has really run out in India to endure this kind of constant attacks on us.
Yeah, so it almost looked like, at least from the outside, that it could escalate. But luckily, so far, it did not escalate. It returned to some sort of normalcy, if you can say that. What do you think now after we had some of these military strikes,
I think I'm glad that it did not escalate into full-fledged war, but I think now the world needs to wake up to the fact that Pakistan is responsible for all this. Pakistan is a state which seems to thrive on exporting terror actors, state and non-state, and the world needs to start putting diplomatic, economic, and social pressure on Pakistan to reform. But I really don't see that happening, because Pakistan as a country is not really governed by democratic norms. It seems to be a country which is completely in the stranglehold of the army. And for the army, this kind of terror strikes and terror acts are a tool of war, because they can't really fight a conventional war against India. And it's really the army. And now if you see that the army general, the chief of the army staff, has been promoted to field marshal. So which means it's the stranglehold of the army is even getting stronger in Pakistan. And there is a common refrain we say in India: every country has an army, but in Pakistan the army has a country. So it's really it's a complicated country. It's a complicated society. It's not doing well economically. It has no viable middle class. Anybody with the resources or education is leaving that country. It's almost becoming a militarized terror state, and it really needs the people in the world need to understand the nature of Pakistan and need to rein in Pakistan effectively.
Yes, it is indeed shocking to see, especially as it affects the whole world. I'm curious what you think that often in the West, Pakistan is called like the terror capital of the world because they are funding like terrorist attacks, not only in India, but across the world, across different terror organizations. What do you think of this terror war that Pakistan does among so many different countries?
Yes, I think this terrorism is business in Pakistan, and it's business in Pakistan because it is a tool for the army, and it's a tool for the army because the army itself controls the society and government there. So it's time that I really have been saying that we should deal with Pakistan like the way that the world dealt with South Africa during apartheid. Pakistan needs to be isolated, ostracized, and a strict embargo needs to be put on Pakistan economically, socially, culturally, and make it difficult for the average Pakistani to travel in the world, to do business, to study, to do, and that kind of pressure needs to be put on Pakistan. That's what happened in South Africa. When apartheid was being followed in South Africa, the South African was not Afrikaans wasn't allowed. White South African wasn't allowed to travel to many countries. Many countries were not allowed to do business with South Africa. I think the time has come for that kind of an ostracization of Pakistan by the world.
And what do you think needs to happen for the pressure to be really put on Pakistan? But because, like you rightfully so said, there doesn't seem to be a lot of movement or consequences of the actions that Pakistan does.
I think the first step is embargo on countries giving visas to Pakistanis. That will start putting pressure on the middle and upper middle class to sort of reacting in Pakistan. I think Pakistani passport must not be recognized in many parts of the world. They must be denied travel, and then the countries must force Pakistan to reform, rein in their army, perhaps shut down and show evidence that they're shutting down these terror camps. Otherwise, they should not trade with them. I think those kind of pressures is what worked on South Africa. The same kind of pressures must be put on Pakistan.
All right, I think it's good to give this clarification. Is there something else people think you should know about the relationship between India and Pakistan, or a way that people can even maybe support India?
India is a vast, complicated country, but we are an open society. Pakistan is an Islamic theocratic state, so we are not the same. We are governed by two different governing principles. And we need to understand that India aspires to be a global player in commerce and science. Pakistan doesn't seem to have any of those ambitions. Pakistan is an India-obsessed country, and we are not a Pakistan-obsessed country. We are more engaged with the world than Pakistan. So Pakistan needs to be told in no uncertain terms that it needs to reform its behavior towards its biggest neighbor. And unless it shuts down these kinds of state, non-state actors, it should be treated as an outcast in the world.
Thank you so much for giving us people in the West a little bit more of an overview of what's going on. Like you said, it's very complicated, and the last thing has not been said. So maybe in the future we can do a follow-up. But I really want to thank you. And can people follow you anywhere and see your thoughts?
I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter, and so my ID is at KARTIPC. So I write reasonably quite regularly on Twitter. But then I'm also reflected on other social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook. But Twitter is something which I use frequently. I write articles, and I'm sure YouTube has enough of my speeches in Parliament and my other interviews.
Thank you so much for making the time today.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and wel te rusten.
Thank you. And of course, also thank you to all our listeners and viewers. If you want to make these kind of conversations possible, please consider subscribing at nieuwrechts.nl, and see you in the next one.
Thank you very much.